Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Brian Glass. Say hi.
Hi, Angie. How are you?
I'm good. I was telling you just before we got started that it's batch recording day. This is 3 of 4. I'm feeling such good energy with all the guests today, so I can't wait to dig into what you've got going on. So in that vein, tell us a little bit more about your business.
Yeah, so I've got 2 businesses. I'm a personal injury lawyer in Fairfax, Virginia, so we're just outside of DC. Mostly I represent people who've been in auto accidents against insurance companies. That's business number 1. Business number 2 is my dad and I run a company called Great Legal Marketing, which is an agency that teaches lawyers in solo and small law firms how to run better businesses. Most lawyers are not good business people. We're very good at the law, and we're very good at staying in the box and telling you why things don't work, but we're not good at thinking outside of the box and looking to other industries to find solutions. And that's what we do at Great Legal Marketing, is we bring in outside of legal knowledge and we share it with legal.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. And wow. So what made you realize that there was a need for that, for people to be coached on that?
Yeah, being around lawyers. So as lawyers and medical professionals have this same thing, and realtors have this same thing. We have a certain number of continuing education hours that you have to do every year. And being in the rooms with those people and constantly hearing what the rules are, and you can't go outside the box, and the ethics rules say you can't do this, we realize that there's a real need for people who can ethically think outside of the box. And then the other half of that is that most lawyers, we're not good marketers. And so we defer to the web vendors to say what should be on the website. We defer to the pay-per-click people to say what you should be running your ads on. And so we help bring in people from the outside world to translate all of that tech speak into legal and all the legal speak back into tech, so that we can cultivate good win-win relationships on both ends of that spectrum.
Ooh, I love that. And I think that's such an interesting thing to bring up, because I know I work with a lot of more creative freelancers, and there tends to be a lot of that assumption of the rules of engagement, how you're supposed to conduct yourself, how you become a professional. And so I see that across businesses where folks kind of, and I know they're not doing it deliberately, but they just don't know how to give themselves that permission to think outside the box, to make their own interpretation of the rules. Like you said, apply this thinking to that outcome that they're trying to get, instead of just following a prescribed route for them. And they're going to come up with something so much better, I think, if they follow their instincts, right? And if they allow themselves to have ideas and experiment and try something and fail, versus just following the directions. You know what I mean? Is that true for you?
That's exactly right. And there's a real beauty in ignorance, right? There's a beauty in not knowing what rules are supposed to be in existence. So the first time that you do something, if you haven't watched a YouTube video or read a book on how to do it, you usually come up with a more creative, more interesting, and sometimes more successful result than if you have spent 8 hours going down the rabbit hole of how do I do the next thing, right? And so just exposing yourself to the way that different industries and different people in your industry operate and achieve success, I think, is incredibly helpful.
I like that too, because I think that there can be a tendency to kind of get boxed in by your industry and not necessarily look outside for inspiration and see, okay, well, cool. I see something happening over here in marketing that could apply to legal. I see something over here in deep sea fishing that could apply to roller skating. There's always a connection there if you're willing to dig for it.
Let me give you the wild example of that. So I'm in an entrepreneurial mastermind group, and we were on a small business owner Zoom call. And I was talking to a guy who owns a roofing company.
Mhm.
about how do you do quality assurance on your salespeople? Like, how can you tell if one sales guy is not following the script or if he's following the script and he's just not very good at selling? And he
Mhm.
said, well, what we do is we have somebody call around after the sales appointment because we know the sales appointment has a certain script and he's got to do these 17 things, including take pictures of the roof, send a drone up to take pictures of the roof, measure the inside, blah, blah, blah. And so then they just have the quality assurance person call and say, geez, sometimes we have to do this. Did he do that? Sometimes it calls for this. Did he do that? And all of these things are things that you have to do on every appointment, but the QA person is acting like they didn't. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, that's brilliant. How can I steal that and implement it in my firm? And so now
Yeah.
every once in a while we call somebody and we say, some of our cases call for us to have this conversation with the client. I'm just curious whether they had this conversation with you. And so now I know if the team is following the script that we've laid out
Mhm.
and not achieving results, or if they're off the script and that's why they're not achieving the results. And so just think, just putting yourself in an environment where there are people that operate in different industries, in different niches that you can learn from, and not having your first response be, well, my business is different or this wouldn't work in my business, is something that's so incredibly powerful to ethically stealing ideas and implementing them in your own industry.
I love that. I think that's the only definition of ethically stealing that I can tolerate, which is I call it creative borrowing. Like, oh, cool. This is something I never would have thought about for marketing or copywriting or for leadership coaching like I do now. I wonder how that would work for me if I just kind of take that seed idea and make it my own. And like, you totally get to do that. You can credit people, you can collaborate with people, you can pay people to teach you. Like, there are all kinds of ways to approach this, but like, yeah, you get to reach out all around you to all different kinds of industries. And I'm glad you mentioned masterminds because I feel, especially with the folks that I have worked with, that there's a little bit of a resistance, probably with the rise of online coaching a little bit.
Mhm.
And especially prescriptive coaching, when people are like, this is the way and the truth and the light, and there are no other ways to success. Bullshit. Bullshit. There are 100 million ways to success, and you could invent a completely new one that none of us has ever seen. You get to do that. But there's kind of almost an inherent suspicion of like, if I join this group, are they going to be taking me for a ride? Am I going to get a good experience out of it? And to that, I say, do you think you're going to get a good experience out of it? Like, have you approached this with the mindset of I'm going to learn something, whatever that looks like, and I set no expectations on what that looks like? Like, I'm not coming in to go, I need a marketing method to learn. I'm just going to see if I surround myself with smart people, what can I learn? I love that.
Well, and backing up on the one direction to success, like not only is that not true, but number one, you have to define for yourself what success is. Because I can give you the prescription to success, but if I don't know what a win is for Angie, then maybe I'm driving you across the finish line, but maybe I'm driving you into a lake, right?
Mhm. Exactly. I think that's the funny thing that we can, there are people out there that presume to know the best path for people. So I'm a digital nomad and I travel a lot, and actually I travel with cats too.
Mm.
Is that right for everybody?
Mm-mm.
No. There are so many people that could not handle the logistics of moving every 6 weeks. And that doesn't make me any better than anybody else out there. But that's the lifestyle that works for me and one that I enjoy. It would drive somebody else absolutely bananas. So who am I to tell you that you need to set up a business that allows you to live my lifestyle? Like, I just don't get this whole prescriptive coaching thing. It drives me nuts.
Yeah. And to your point about masterminds and are they gonna get me? Yeah, maybe, right?
Mhm.
Especially if you show up with that attitude about are they going to get me? What I've found, and I hate prescriptive coaching, is that really the power of any mastermind group has much more to do with the other folks that are in the room with you than it does with the
Mhm.
guy or the girl who's at the front of the room. And so we run one, and we run two levels of mastermind in Great Legal Marketing, and I make a deliberate effort in both of them to. I'm not sitting up front, right? The magic
Mhm.
is in the room. I'll facilitate the discussion, but I try to be not the first one who's asking questions because I want the rest of the room to be the value driver. And we do a really good job, I think, of cultivating who can come into the room and who cannot through an application process and a screening process. Where I want to make sure that if you're coming into the room, you're there because you think you can add value to everybody else and not just extract.
Mhm. That's such an interesting like dichotomy almost. I don't think that's the exact right word that I'm looking for, but within leadership too, because when we're first starting out, we look at a leader as somebody that
Yeah.
commands the room, right? That is a boss. and we work on, if we want to become that leader, developing those skills. But then it's funny to me how almost every leader that I've encountered, somebody that has their own group or who has been on stage, almost everybody seems to independently arrive at the same conclusion that you have and I have, which is when I'm leading, I'm not in front of the room. I am facilitating everybody else to step up, right? I want them to step up and shine and take what they will from this. I think when I held my first live event, that was probably the biggest learning, because I came to this live event thinking that I had to fill the space and teach, right? And download what I had learned into their brains. And then I realized that I have to get out of the way. That's my job at this event.
Does that put on you if you feel like you're the one that has to deliver for 12 hours or 18 hours or however long your event is? But if you can just play air traffic control and connect smart people with smart people, you look much better than you do if you're the one up lecturing, for 12 hours.
Yeah. And if you're trying to do that lecture presentation thing, that just brings in another element of that kind of prescriptive thing. I presume to know what everybody in the room needs, and I'm just going to teach at you instead of bringing you into this process to where you can create your own experience, right? I didn't expect to go on that tangent. So, well, tell me a little bit more about your journey within personal injury law, because it sounds like you might have had a different experience from what most of us might perceive personal injury lawyers.
Yeah. So I'll tell you my journey in the law. Number one was that I graduated in 2008 from law school, which is the worst time in the last 3 decades to graduate from law school, because all of the credit markets collapsed and all of the big firms that were handing out, starting salary at a big firm at the time was $160,000 a year. All of those jobs evaporated, right? And so my friends and I went to school and took out loans with the promise that that was going to be what it was. And my first job out of school was $60,000. They took the one away. And I ended up at a general practice firm, which means we did absolutely everything. And I got absolutely no training. So I was sworn into the Virginia State Bar on a Tuesday. And on Wednesday, they sent me to court with my first client and nobody by my side and no instruction.
Wow.
So I lasted at that firm for about 4 months because the culture was just toxic. And I lucked into a job at an auto accident firm doing personal injury work. And I know that you don't have a law podcast, so I won't spend too much time on this. But in the personal injury space, you're paid a contingency fee. So I only make money if I earn money for my clients, and I earn a third of whatever we resolve or get a verdict on the case for. And so the goal then becomes, how can I attract larger and larger cases? And how can I build a system and a process to run those cases as efficiently as possible through the system? Because that's the way to lever up your effective hourly rate in that space in the law. And so unlike most lawyers, I don't earn any more money necessarily if I work a 60 or 70 or 80 hour week as opposed to 35. And I very much prefer working 35. And so I've built a life within that space where I'm not killing myself. We're working on good cases for good clients. And I've got boys who are 10, 8, and 5, and I'm able to leave the office in sports season at 4:00 every day to go coach their team. So I've coached soccer, I've coached baseball, I've assistant coached flag football. I stay away from basketball because I'm short. But I'm active in everything else. And that's what I wanted to do. I don't really care to be the top 1% lawyer. And so now I don't spend hardly any time working on how to be a better lawyer. And I always have to say this part, doesn't give you an excuse to be a shitty lawyer. If you're a good marketer, you still have to be good. But there's diminishing returns on being, top 10% versus top 1%. And I don't make any more money, and I don't get any more money for the client by making the next best objection. Right.
Yes.
So it's all about, in our firm, how do we attract good clients that listen to us? So we lead with a lot of information. We have webinars about, what are these cases about? Because for most people, it's your one interaction with the legal system. And I want you to be educated by the time you come here so that I don't have to educate you in a one-on-one situation on every single case, because that's very time consuming.
Yes.
And then really it's about, okay, if I want a high caliber of clients, what kind of a lawyer do I have to become? What kind of marketing do I have to have? And what does my front desk staff have to be able to deliver in terms of client experience. Like most law offices, if you call, still pick up the phone and either yell law offices at you or the four names of the partners, right? Like that's stupid. So you call here, it's hey, thank you for calling Ben Glass Law. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Like what can we help you with, right? And so we've built a really we're trying to build a company that's centered around customer service. And while we are delivering an excellent legal product, I don't care if it's top 10% or top 1%.
I love that you said that. And I feel like you're probably the first person who has said that on the show. I feel very strongly about that too, that I used to be compelled to be the best, to be the top. And somewhere along the way, I realized that it takes a lot of work to be the best. And once you become the best, there are people that are gunning for you because they want to be the best. And like, do I have the energy to fight to develop my skills and also fight these people off to keep my position? No. Am I cool with good enough? Yes, I am cool with being in the top. I would say, 5 to 10% of business coaches out there. Is that full of myself? I don't know. I like to think I'm pretty good because I give a damn and I work on getting better every day, right? But do I want to be the best? No, that is way too much work and I am far too lazy to make that happen.
There will come a time in my career when I get sued for legal malpractice and I hear these tapes replayed over and over and over of me saying on various shows and, and speeches that it really doesn't matter if you're top 10% or top 1%, and that'll get thrown back in my face. But honestly, how does the client ever know? How do you ever distinguish as, was it a B+ argument or an A+ argument? What you know is the result, and what you know is how you felt about the result. And so again, we really try to focus on client experience much more than, because if I'm an A+ lawyer but an asshole, I don't get hired again.
I think that's the hilarious thing too, that how success and how being the best has somehow been conflated with just being a supreme jackass to people. No, because you know what? You're never going to be where you are for the rest of time, right? And being an asshole now may feel good when you're on top, but what happens when, shit hits the fan and you don't have the business that you once had and you need to turn to people for help? We're always going to need to turn to people for help. So to me, I feel just like being a jerk is probably the worst thing that you could do for your long-term success, but that's just me.
No, I completely agree. There will always come a time when you need to ask somebody on the other side of the aisle for a favor. And I don't want to run out of favors.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier about creating this system that worked for the life that you wanted to live and figuring out what kind of clients you wanted and how you could serve them efficiently. So was that the specific choice that you made? Like you decided, this is the kind of lifestyle I want to live. I want to work 25 to 35 hours and I'm going to reverse engineer that. Is that something that just kind of happens? I want to know more about that. It
doesn't just happen, right? What just happens is you take on more clients and different work and I can do that also. And then you have a business that you hate. That's what just happened. No, so this is deliberate. So the book that I recommend over and over and over is Cameron Herold's Vivid Vision, which talks about casting the vision for what you want your life to look like 3 years down the road. And for me, it was exactly that. It was being able to get home for dinner on time all the time, being able to coach sports, being able to travel, and working on interesting cases for clients that I liked. And so at this stage in my 15 years into my career, that kind of looks like serious surgery and fracture and brain injury cases, and with clients that have good health insurance, because that's the way to get medical care, right? And large insurance policies on the other side, because it doesn't matter if you have a multi-million-dollar value case if there's no insurance to pay for it. And so okay, after you put all of that stuff on a piece of paper, and the method that I use, I just went to a coffee shop one day and just started jotting notes, and then came back and wrote it out into I think it's like a 5-page vision statement that I have. And then you come back and you say, okay, what do I need to do next year? What kind of things do I need to accomplish to get me closer to being there in 2026? And if I need to accomplish that by next year, what do I have to accomplish in the next quarter, in the next month? And what things can I do in the next week that if I did them every week would make it unreasonable that I didn't achieve that result?
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it's really interesting how often vivid vision has come up in the last 2 weeks. I feel like you're probably the fourth or fifth person I think I got to download it now.
It's a good book. Yeah. So I'll tell you, when I read it initially, I did not understand it. And it, I don't typically learn by reading so much as I learn by doing and listening. And so my recommendation to you would be download it or read it. Yes. But go on Spotify and search Vivid Vision. And because there are certain podcasters that have, and I'm one of them, that have read theirs.
Yeah.
And hearing other people's visions and getting inspired by what other people are doing was really the unlock for me to be able to put those things into words much more than just reading the book. And the book is great, but personally, I needed to hear examples of what other people had done before I could put mine pen to paper.
I love that you said that, because I think there's some judgment, there's some feelings associated with folks if they say got the book and read it and didn't understand it and came to the conclusion that like, well, I just didn't get it, or it's not for me, or even worse, they started to judge themselves, feeling like they were deficient for not getting it. But I think kudos are in order for you going, okay, there's something here. I think that there's something underneath the surface, and I don't resonate with it this way. Maybe I need some real world examples. I'm going to go look this up.
I wish it were that deliberate.
Well, but you found a way to make it make sense to you. And
I think what happened is I tripped back onto it 3 months later.
Well, that to me just speaks about things working in their own timing, because I can't tell you how often that's happened. It turns out, and I didn't discover this until years later, but I started my copywriting career in 2010. But it turns out I had owned a book on freelance copywriting since 2006. And I remember reading this book and just kind of going, huh? It was entirely over my head. So when I was a couple years down the path, I want to say 2013, 2014 or so, I stumbled across this book in my collection that had, just been shoved in the corner and growing a thick coating of dust. And I read it again, and suddenly it made sense. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that's how now these days I go, maybe the context isn't there. If I didn't understand it, I might be missing something that makes this make sense. So I know it wasn't deliberate on your part, but I like the fact that you went back into it and just learned a different way, learned in your own way.
I'm curious about that, because this came up on an episode that I recorded with a friend of mine earlier this week. How do you know when the reason that it didn't make sense to you is like you were banging your head against the wall, and if you hit it one more time, the wall is going to break down, versus you're just banging your head against the wall and it's not? Do you have a way for Angie that you determine like I'm almost there versus I should quit?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think to me, it comes back to trusting my own instincts. And this is why I loved that we started off talking about like the way that you build your business is the way you build your business. I can't prescribe this to you. So to me, whether or not to keep going often comes down to my gut. And I know that that's kind of nebulous, but it feels like I'm really excited by this. I'm frustrated that I'm not there yet. Something is calling me to do this thing. And I'm constantly wondering whether this is too hard and I should give up. But I still am very fascinated by it, right? That's one energy. And then the other energy is like, I'm doing this thing and I'm frustrated and I'm stressed out and my shoulders are up here and I'm waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety. Like the first one feels good. It feels like a call to adventure, almost a challenge to step up into a bigger version of myself and to look at myself critically and see whether there's a better way I could be doing. Could I be contacting mentors and other people and finding out an easier way to do this? Is the way that I'm doing, am I running into obstacles because that's not the way that I'm supposed to be doing things and there's an easier way? And if I don't just get stuck on, I need to bang my head against this particular door,
right,
maybe I bang my head against that window and it breaks and I get a little bit of a cut, but I got through, or maybe I've told coaching students, it's so funny that you used that example. It's like, I mean, you can keep banging your head against the wall all you want, or you can move 10 feet down and there's a door. I'm a big fan of making it easier on yourself wherever possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes it's a change in perspective, but to me, it's always looking inward and seeing, how do I feel about this? Like, how do I truly feel about this from a non-judgmental place? Is this something that is like going to the gym where it's super painful? I've been doing this workout lately called Wonder Woman, and it's no joke. It does make me feel like Wonder Woman, but there are sets where I can't get the weight up. No matter how I'm sitting there and I am talking to the muscle and I am willing it and it will not move. Okay, cool. I can set that weight down. I know I'm getting stronger, even though I failed at that rep, right? So that's the energy that I look for in anything that I think is worth pursuing and that I know will lead to a breakthrough. It's like, it feels like it's challenging me to get better versus I am like sitting here in misery wondering when this is going to end.
I like that. Yeah, I like that answer for that. Thank you.
That's the first time anybody's ever asked me that. So I hope that made sense to everybody that's listening. That's the first time I've had to articulate it, but that's a great conversation worth having, like knowing when to pursue something. Because I've had several instances like that in my life where I heard a clear calling in my gut that made no sense whatsoever. So like when I became a copywriter, I wound up choosing to live in my car in San Francisco because I suddenly just heard, this inner me, some voice from the universe or a version of myself that was old and wise or something said, if you go back home now, if you go to safety and try to rebuild, you're going to wait tables for the rest of your life. Stay here. This is where you need to be. And the day that I lost my apartment, I had to turn in keys and I was going to move into my car is the day that I got my first copywriting job offer. And so I've had several instances of that in my life where it was like, just sometimes the intuition tells you to do something that doesn't make any damn sense. And if you tell the people in your life that this is what my gut is telling me to do, they're going to be like, you are crazy and you are taking a stupid risk. Don't do that to yourself. And you got to do it anyway, because that's the only way you're going to learn to trust yourself. And I'm not advising homelessness. I'm just saying, like, if you don't have to, if you don't have to choose that, don't choose that. But like, know that what you're trying to build is worth pursuing and worth dedicating all of yourself to. And it's worth the struggle in my mind. And I don't know a single entrepreneur who has gotten to a business that they enjoy. I'm assuming you too, without having to go through these periods of struggle and like, am I even doing the right thing?
And like, is it fun? So for me, it's not so much, am I doing the right thing? It's like, is it fun anymore? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes a time in my career, and it's coming about now, like where representing people in lawsuits is not all that fun anymore. Mm-hmm. And people just tell you you're wrong all the time as a lawyer. It's a client says, no, it's my cousin had a different outcome. Like, okay, what does your cousin know? Adjusters, insurance adjusters are always telling me I'm wrong. Defense lawyers, sometimes judges.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it takes a certain level of ego.
Yeah.
and I feel sometimes like I just don't need that anymore. And so now I'm working on cultivating. I have an associate and I have a partner, and my job in 2023 really is to try to elevate myself out of much of the provision of the legal services and still run a great company. But I don't have to be the one who's answering discovery and sitting in on depositions and getting clients ready for trial and fielding phone calls in the middle of, like, I don't have to be the one that does that to still be involved. And so that's just an entirely different mindset shift. To, okay, this thing that was interesting to me once for a long time is no longer all that interesting anymore. And then wrapping your head around, but there's somebody for whom this is a great job, right?
Yes.
Because as entrepreneurs and as business owners, I think we tend to assume that if we don't want to do it, there ain't nobody out there that wants to do it. And it's just not true, right? There's somebody for whom organizing the stack of medical documents is a dream job. Getting the spreadsheets ready is a dream job. It's not me, but there's somebody out there.
I'm so glad you said that, because I had that same idea as well for such a long time, because I'm such a creative person and that's what I love to do. I loved finding the right phrase, finding that name for a product, writing that email campaign that did really well. I loved that puzzle of coming up with the words so much that I could not imagine a world in which everybody else also didn't want to do this. And it really became clear to me one day working with a client. And it was funny because she had, and I don't know if this has happened to you before, if this is just a creative services thing. She had spent 2 weeks trying to write this email herself to make it easier on me. And I had to tell her, this is literally what I do, and for the future, it would be a lot faster. And I think it would spare you a lot of this struggle and this agonizing if we just hopped on the call and you told me what you need, who it's going to, what you're trying to achieve, what are the links, what do you not ever want me to say in this email? And then like, let me take a stab at it because I'm pretty good. Whereas if you're struggling on this, something has already gone wrong in this process. Like just bring me in. I promise I can help and I can ask the questions to help you get unstuck. So anyway, we jump on the meeting. She shows me the draft of this email. And this is the first time that it really became clear to me. I go in and I edited 2 sentences according to what she wanted this thing to achieve. And she just goes, "What kind of witchcraft did you just do?" Like, I watched you edit that. And I know it's still my own words, and I still don't understand how you changed the meaning so drastically. And that was when it finally clicked to me that I'm a word person and she's not a word person. She works over here in this sandbox. I get to play with words. And exactly like you said, there are math people, there are spreadsheet people, there are organizing people. Like, you get to find people who play in the sandboxes that you would never go near. And life ggets so much better that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So another book recommendation is Ben Hardy's 10X is easier than 2X, which is exactly about that. It's about doing less stuff. Like it's about finding the person who's really good at doing the thing that you hate doing and focusing on your own, Pareto principle, 20% of the things that gets you 80% of the results. And then instituting that throughout the rest of your organization.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about doing less stuff.
I think that's interesting too. And I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier, which was working yourself out of the business. Because I know when I was a young and eager freelance copywriter, I had a mentor tell me, someday odds are you're going to want to step out of this and you're going to want to do something different. So this is why there's room for all of us, because people are constantly moving up, moving out, changing priorities, changing business models, changing industries. And as they move up, they're creating a vacuum. They're pulling people up with them. That's pulling up people with them. And it just didn't make sense at the time, much like that freelancer book where I was like, what, are you kidding me? I love the words too much. I'm always going to be a copywriter. And then 13 years later, not so much.
That's like the sweet spot. I think 13 to 15 years is like, I've been doing this for a while. Am I going to do this forever or am I not?
Yeah. And when you give yourself that permission to be like, okay, cool, I've done that and I feel really good about the work I've done. And what's next? What else can I do? You create that room for other people to step up. And exactly like you said, build a business where you get to step out of the day-to-day. And this is the best part for me. Somebody else gets to shine and own their magic and do really, really great work. And we all get that much better together because I let go of this illusion of control that like I had to be the person to do the thing.
And, to kind of circle back to the power of the mastermind, like it's good to be around other people that are in similar life stages that you are, because it can be scary to let really what has been, the thing that put food on your table for 13 years, let it go to somebody else. And then think, well, if I train the person to do that as well as I do, why wouldn't they just go and start their own business and compete with me? And now I'm right back there. Right. But being around other people that have successfully navigated that change is really important.
Absolutely. Oh man, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. Tell us a little bit more about your business and where we can learn about you.
So, the business that probably would be most interesting to your audience is called Great Legal Marketing. It's a structure and way for lawyers to run better law firms. So we are for solo and small firm lawyers in consumer facing businesses. So that means, if you're doing wills, if you're doing auto accidents, if you're doing criminal defense, we're not for government lawyers. We're not for big firm lawyers. And so we put on a big event every year. Our summit is going to be in Orlando in October this year. And then we run a couple of high ticket masterminds that are in our offices in Fairfax once a quarter.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that they have clickable links to that in the show notes. And thank you again so much for being on the show.
Of course, Angie. Thank you for having me.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.